Good morning, everyone. We'd like to begin, if you can find a seat. We know there are still people coming in, and hope they will feel free to come. There's a lot of space down the front, those of you that are coming in right now. You are a beautiful sight. We have been planning this conference since last summer, and it's thrilling to have you here at Utah Valley University. There are over 500 women in the state that have self-selected to be at this conference, and we're very appreciative of the efforts that you made to be here. My name is Kathy Debenham. I am the chair of UWHEN for this year and the conference chair, as well as the state coordinator for the ACE Women's Network. It does take something of a village to do a conference. I'm sure you're all aware of that. And I'd appreciate it if all of the conference team members would stand, as well as any of the conferences and workshops members, staff members in the room, so that we can recognize the people that made today possible. Come on, stay up so that people can clap for you. Thank you. Oops. Sorry about that. Here we are. So if you are new to UWHEN, you may not know that UWHEN is a part of the American Council on Education, ACE Women's Network. And as the state coordinator, I work with the institutional representatives from the institutions that are members of UWHEN and with our presidential sponsor. As an ACE network, we develop programs such as this annual conference that identify, develop, encourage, advance, link, and support women in higher education in our state. The current ACE Women's Network has recently launched a new initiative called Moving the Needle to address the importance of achieving parity and to implement changes designed to achieve the goal of representation of women in senior leadership positions. Their most recent research shows that of all of the presidential positions in our colleges and universities, 26% of them are women, where there is something close to high 40s women that are in higher education. So they're very interested in having many sectors come together to help bring more opportunities for women leadership to the table. So a little UWHEN history. Sorry, I have a new clicker here that I hadn't been using before. A little history. UWHEN was established in September 2010, and our first state board meeting was held here at UVU in February of 2011. You can see our institutional partners there, and you can also see that we are an all-volunteer organization. And I would appreciate it if all of the institutional representatives would stand. These are the individuals on your campuses. Now, I don't see anyone standing. If you are an institutional representative, stand tall on your feet. These are the women that serve on the board. Thank you. These are the ones that serve on the board. They provide activities on your campuses, as well as work collaboratively as a board to advance the causes of women's leadership in Utah. And I would like to give a special thanks to UVU Vice President Michelle Taylor, who provided your free parking today. So Michelle, wherever you are, thank you. So the UN mission is very similar to the mission of ACE. We identify women leaders, we develop their leadership abilities, we encourage the use of those abilities, advance women's careers, link them to other women and mentors, and support women in mid-level and executive-level career positions. And as you look around the room, we are primarily, maybe I should say overwhelmingly, female faculty, staff, and administrators interested in developing leadership knowledge, skills, and abilities to prepare to move into positions of greater influence within higher education. So a warm welcome to you all. It's my privilege now to introduce President Matthew Holland, who, yes, that's a warm woohoo for our president. Come on up. Wow, you got long legs. President Holland has served as the presidential sponsor for our board for 3 years and has been a tireless advocate for advancing the opportunities for women's leadership at UVU, as well as supporting the increase in the number of female students that enter and graduate from UVU. So we're very happy to hear a few words from him right now.
Anytime I can start a meeting with a cat call, that's a good meeting as far as I'm concerned. So thank you. And how about Kathy's diplomacy? Look around the room and we are overwhelmingly women. I think I'm the only one here, but thank you. There was one other man, Wade Oliver, one of our great counselors outside. And I said, Wade, how did you get so fortunate? You're the only other one that gets to come to this great thing with me. And he's like, I was told to be here as window dressing. I called HR on that one. So this is really very, very gratifying to me. I am honored to be the original presidential sponsor for UWHEN. It started back in 2011. And it was a great beginning, but compared to what I see right here, it was a very modest beginning. And that is true of almost all great things, is that they start small, because in some ways they're ahead of their time, or they're addressing important issues that have been neglected, that need to be changed, and that was what was happening in 2011. And so I stand here very gratified to see this full ballroom of outstanding women leaders in education, a number of them that have had a big impact on my life. I had a nice little exchange with Liz Hitch, who was a great friend and mentor to me as I came on board. She'd served here as interim president and was my first chief academic officer. I learned so much from her about leadership, about educational leadership, but leadership in general. Surrounded by two outstanding vice presidents who are here today, Linda Macon and Michelle Taylor, who are just a treasure to work with and add such incredible value to this campus. And then working with Kathy Debenham and Susan Madsen, who are really the visionaries behind what's happening here before us, who feel passionately about it, but didn't just follow their passions, they followed their mind. They've researched this, they've studied it, we've talked about it. Susan's research is transforming the way the state are seeing some of these issues, and we're so grateful for her inaugural leadership carried on by Kathy Debenham's efforts, and this really now is sort of our final moment as the original sponsor of this important movement as it moves on to Dixie University. And so I think it would be very appropriate to especially ask Susan and Kathy to just please stand one more time. Round of applause for what they've done to get this going. Well, you know, and Kathy's given us a nice little tour of what this network is about, and it is such vital work today. We still have too few young women who come into the university to begin with, even fewer who finish their degrees. Some institutions doing better than others. There are some regions doing better than others. Lots of people working on this issue, and we're certainly working on this issue, and this network has been a vital partner in terms of our thinking about this and how we move forward. I'm extremely proud of the progress we've made. This year we cut the ribbon on a brand new We Care Center. This is a $3 million facility, first building raised entirely by private donations on this campus. And I think that says something about this community and about its determination to rise up and do some things that would help in a very practical way. Now, we're very conscious of the fact that We Care Centers is not just for women. Men are parents too, and they have access to it, but we know that as a practical matter that it tends to help more women in this situation of raising children. And what a benefit this will be. This will quadruple, if not quintuple, the number of students that we can help that are in this situation, so that some of these things that historically have been a roadblock to finishing degrees can be dealt with in a way that makes it much more accessible to them. We're so grateful for our Center for Women's Success and Ann Wyrepo and her great leadership. This is really, for me, a gem here on campus. We'd long had a center on campus, and it did some tremendous work that we're still doing, helping women in crisis and women facing real trauma and difficulty. And there's still too much of that in the world around us, and so we still do that. But we wanted to build off of that, to say we need to do more than just deal with the crises. We need to show the positive role models. We need to have mentoring. We need to create this culture of success for our female students to come in and enjoy. And Ann has stepped in and just given us such outstanding leadership. And there's a whole collection of entities now that operate within and under that umbrella that I think are making a difference on a daily basis. So I pay tribute to our folks here who are working hard on this. I know that each of you come from institutions that are doing your own work, and so I commend you for that. I encourage you to keep moving forward, keep dialoguing with your administration and with your community to build things. There are ways to do this. There's support out there for it. Like anything we do in higher education today, we do have to be prudent and thoughtful. There aren't enough resources to do everything we'd like to do, but I think if we'll be reasonable but remain energetic, there's so much more that we can do. And this network will be a vital partner in achieving those things around this state. And I guess that's the final note that I would like to conclude on. As you come to this conference, we hope you enjoy this. We hope you enjoy this campus. You take a chance to stroll around. We're changing every day, it seems here. The growth, the dynamism is so exciting, and we'd love you to be part of it in any way that you care to, whatever institution you're coming from. But let me just offer this one thought in conclusion about you and how you might see yourself in the movement moving forward here. And that's to say this network is already become powerful. We're sort of here almost standing room only now. Again, a far cry from where we were in 2011. And at some point, I understand we had to cap the enrollment for the conference because we couldn't accommodate more. And that was not the case the first year. So there is something growing here, and there's energy, and it will continue to grow, continue to be more powerful and be more exciting. And the enthusiasm you have is just palpable. And I understand you were here early. Some of you came 3 or 4 a.m. apparently. Very impressive. But I feel that. You must feel that. But I guess my final, if I offer one closing word of counsel or thought to you, is don't think that the network is something else. The network is you. It's each of you doing what you can do in your individual sphere. I've always loved this sentiment from Helen Keller, a woman who was ahead of her time, an activist, a leader, a visionary in that wonderfully ironic way, given the state of her physical senses, pioneering herself in a kind of a man's world. And she says this: I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do something that I can do. There are big problems and big issues and so much ground to be made up there that it's easy to get overwhelmed. But don't get overwhelmed, and don't cast off the responsibility to some big amorphous network. Seize the opportunities that are in front of you individually. And if each of you within this network will do this, you will be absolutely amazed at what you will accomplish in the days and years ahead. Thank you very much, and good luck to you and all that you do.
So I'd like to quickly announce our fall workshops, just to let you know that we are ready to go with our workshops in the fall. You have a flyer that has this information on it, so you can put it on your calendars. But our first one is in September 19th at Weber, the Care and Use of the Professional Voice. There is a limit on these workshops, so I think, Susan, do we open registration in July? Yeah. So there'll be an announcement that goes out to our network saying that the registration's open, and you'll have an opportunity to participate if you wish. Friday, September 26th at Slick's Taylorsville Redwood, become a power connector. And finally, the leading from what, where, and who you are, inspiring others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more at Dixie on Friday, October 3rd. Finally, this is your long range save the date. Our next conference will be at Dixie State University. We appreciate so much that they stepped up to host the conference next year. And so we're going to be picking up and heading south for our conference. And make sure you put that on your calendars. Here's just a brief overview of the day. We have our morning breakout sessions. If you haven't checked the back of your tag, that's where your breakout sessions are listed. Some of you didn't select breakout sections, and that means that you would go to center stage, which is at the end of the hall here. So after the morning breakout, we'll have a lunch activity where you have selected a table with a topic for discussion. And if you haven't selected one, then come join a table and enjoy the conversation. We'll then have our afternoon breakout sessions. And we will conclude, not in here, but in the Reagan Theater, which is upstairs, the other end of the building, with a closing plenary session on life, art, and leadership. And we hope that you will enjoy the day, as I am sure you will. I'd like to ask Susan Madsen to introduce our keynote speaker. You've already heard Susan. Come on up, Susan. Susan was our inaugural chair for 2 years, and has worked with Ms. Wheatley, and we're very pleased to have her do that introduction now.
Oh, great. They're going to put my face really big behind me, aren't they?
Yes.
Oh, lovely. Anyway, it's so good to see you here. So, Kathy had asked me to introduce Meg. I actually met Meg, and I was thinking about this on my way in about 10 years ago. She lives up at Sundance, even though she's all over the world, all the time, seriously. She lives up at Sundance as her base, and I remembered about 10 years ago going to your home and meeting Meg and interviewing her for an article that Scott Hammond and I wrote called Where Have All the Leaders Gone? And that was my first time, and I knew from that interview, spending an hour or so with her, what a great and amazing thinker that she is. And then, after I interviewed her, I started reading all her books. So I have all of her books on my shelf. And for those she's in the leadership field, which is what I do. For those that are in that field, they know the book, Leadership and the New Science, which didn't it hit the New York Times list? I mean, it was big. But she has done so many other books, and that's in the description, some of that here. But my favorite is a very little short book that Meg wrote called Perseverance. And it is just, I have read it probably 3 times. It just brings renewal to my soul. So Meg has worked for 40 years with leaders on all continents and with all types of organizations and communities. Since 1973, she has taught, consulted, advised, and published 7 award-winning books. I mentioned a couple of those. And they're very, very, very thought-provoking and good. Facing our current reality without blinders of denial, she invites us to take on the role of warriors for the human spirit. She is the founder and president of the Breakout Institute, and her articles, she's got the books and her articles, she's written for professional journals, scholarly journals, blogs, all kinds of things as well. So she received her doctorate in organizational behavior from Harvard University and a master's in media ecology from New York University. And she is just so passionate about helping people develop leadership and thinking more about how they can influence the world. And the last thing I wanted to say is she's a happy mother and grandmother, and she loves that. That's her favorite thing. So we are deeply honored today, especially have someone so respected in the field that I'm in, to have Meg with us today. Thank you, Meg.
Thank you, Susan. Good morning. Sitting there, I was calculating. I've been working in many different fields, but one continuous stream has been working with women who are preparing themselves to be academic administrators. And this has been going on for 40 years, which is why you all look a lot younger to me, you know. And just last year, we had a reunion of the Project HERS group, which had cultivated women presidents, and so we had a reunion of all the presidents who had succeeded. And I also want to bring into the room one of the most wonderful people in my life who was probably the first person to gather academic women together, Carolyn Desjardins from Utah originally. And just before she died, she gave me this ring, which is a Hopi ring, Kokopelli. And she got off of her deathbed to go get the ring, and I feel deeply honored to continue in her stream of encouraging all of you to step forward as women leaders. So I want to first get to know you a little bit. What does this title say to you? The future of the world depends on women. It came from Kofi Annan when he was Secretary General of the United Nations. Do you believe it? Yes, no? How many of you believe it? Let's just, all right. Well, then we have something to talk about today, okay? I've been trying to support women leaders wherever I find them. So I just told you about my work with academic leaders, but I've also worked with women all over the world, especially women in poor communities who just could no longer wait for the men to get it together and have stepped forward to care for the children, to create local economies and the like. And I want to start by actually introducing you to what I think Kofi Annan meant by this statement. So I'm going to take you far from Utah and give you a sense of what's really going on with women in the world. As I've worked with this quote, I believe he meant two things. The first is women must step forward as leaders. So good that you're here. The second part of the quote is, if we don't start attending to the plight of women and children in this world, then nothing good will come of it. One of the people who worked in the United Nations, a Canadian man, and he was responsible for the UN program on children, he said, I have to conclude after all these years, and his heart was breaking when he said this. He said, I have to conclude that this is a world that does not care about its children. So we have to deal with that. I'm going to present some very dark realities to you. And there is a method to why I do this. Because we're in too much denial. So this quote, which I based my most recent book on, says that we can find the very capacities we need, gentleness, decency, bravery. We can find those qualities if we open our hearts, if we open our minds to what's going on in the world. What I have found in my own work is the energy we put into pretending it's not so bad, or pretending bad things aren't happening elsewhere in the world. Once we open to it, we discover limitless compassion. And then we have a lot of energy. So that's why I'm going to present, which is a very dark picture of what's happening with women in the world. But I want you all to know this, and I certainly hold them in my heart as I describe them. In fact, this photo I took all the photos, but this was a woman making her evening meal in Zimbabwe, and a group of us Western women were there, and we actually got up and helped her, and it was really hard work. You know? But here's the status of women worldwide. We do 70% of the work. I happen to think this is a low estimate, but it depends on your home life. And we receive 5 to 10% of the income, and we only own 1% of global wealth. So there's gross inequality here. A second set of statistics is women of the world do not go to school. So 70% of the illiterates are women. 70% of the world's poor are women. And of course, this now you have to put children at the end of this as well. We have that in our own state. You know, the statistics of women below the poverty line then takes you to realize, oh, this is about children in the state of Utah as well. And 500 million women suffer from malnutrition, and 80% of all refugees. There are over 20 million refugees right now. Most of them are women with their children. So every minute, a woman dies of childbirth. Every time I have been present for the birth of a grandchild, I have held them in my heart. Young women have the fastest growing rate of HIV/AIDS, and 1/3 of all women in the world, 1 out of 3, suffer from domestic abuse. It's quite a statistic. So let me just check how your heart is feeling right now. Is it opening or softening, or you just feel that no, I don't want to know this? Why is she telling me this? And I would just ask you to relax and just send out love, or just send out a good thought of appreciation for our own blessed life here. But it gets worse. I start dark, and then you'll end up feeling okay. So women in war. So World War I, civilians were safe. 5% of them were victims. But now women and children are the objects of war, and 95% of the casualties are always civilians. And that is made more horrific by the fact that among the world's biggest industries are these 3. Now, the Catholic sisters that I work with, the nuns who work out in the world, say, no, these are the top 3. But I couldn't validate that. So, but look at this list. This is a world that does not care about its children. This seems to be a world that has lost sight of what human beings need to have a good life. So, weapons are a major industry from the developed countries, including ours, to the non-developed countries. We create the problem, and we make money. This is such an outrageous fact that Archbishop Tutu from South Africa a few years ago wrote a letter saying, you know, this has to stop. You're arming our citizens, so then they kill each other. But we make money. So it's the US, Germany, Russia, France, and I think the UK. So all the, you know, the favored democracies of the world. Okay, so this is the world in which you have chosen to step forward in a very blessed state, right? So here's the good news. This, for me, is the only good news of the 21st century so far. It's what happens when women are given economic power. Small businesses, micro-lending. So many things work well. Community health improves, literacy increases, infrastructure, the places look good, the local economy develops, and children thrive. I want to tell you about this woman. She's a South African fisherwoman. And this is a group of some of the feistiest women that I've met. And they decided that they could be commercial fisherwomen, but they do it differently. They've had to suffer tremendous, outrageous attacks from the men. They told us a story of one day they couldn't get their truck broke down, and these boats are like 14 feet long. They're just little dinghies, but they couldn't get the boat down to the water using their vehicle, and the men were just sitting there and saying, "Well, ladies, it looks like you won't be able to fish today." She said, "We just picked up that boat and we marched it down to the water singing Cher's song. We don't need you anymore." You know? So that's globalization in its good sense. But they also feel that they make their quotas. It's very important to make their quotas daily because they go out and they sing hymns to the fish. And then the fish offer themselves. And when one woman is sick, they substitute. You know, they'll take her quota out for 3 months at a time. And for the women who don't want to be fisherwomen, this is what happens in these communities. They've created other work for them. That's why the whole community starts to prosper when women have economic means. This has been such a big part of this century that I don't know if you've been in any airports and seen these posters, but CARE International, what it reads is, "Women, the world's largest untapped natural resource. She has the power to change her life. We have the power to help her, but we don't need to do it for her." So this is wonderful news, right? And then the United Nations said when women are leaders, the whole society improves. The country that has the most women in parliament, does anyone know? It's Rwanda. The victims of that horror, the women, gathered together and just decided to run for office and do something. So last I looked, which was a year ago though, they were 57% of the parliamentarians. And they were passing laws, you know, like to stop domestic abuse and such. That's turning one's grief, unbelievable grief, into purposeful work for others. So a recent study from our own land of MIT, Carnegie Mellon, and Union College found that when you have more women in a group, the quality of decision-making goes up. Is anyone surprised about that? Right? Of course it does, because we actually listen to each other and think together and aren't trying to just push through an agenda. So it's nice to have it validated. Okay, now let's turn closer to home. And again, I'd like you to check the condition of your hearts, because now I'm actually going to ask you a series of questions about your own leadership and about stepping forward to serve this world. You don't have to go to Rwanda, you don't have to go to South Africa, but you do have to think about how much you're willing to engage yourself and train and prepare yourself as a woman leader in this state. Because this state, it's very hard to be a woman leader. So I am, at the end, going to talk about the book that Susan mentioned, Perseverance, because it's all about how we stay and how we withstand all the slings and arrows of outrageous misfortune. But here's some statistics that I got from Susan's very recent policy brief, which I really encourage you to read. So women in academe, by position, National is on top and Utah is below. So we don't do very well, do we? And in fact, it's worse. These are aggregate statistics where all 8 higher education institutions were averaged together. I got really interested on who's doing what, and so disaggregated the statistics. So nationally, if you just look at women vice presidents, of which there are 2 here out of 6, which is great, the national average is close to 40%. Vice presidents in Utah, it's 23%, but it's much worse than that. There are a few institutions in this state that pull up the others, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. I do want to say that even this statistic nationally, if it varies widely given the prestige and the whether it's a university or a community college. So even as a national aggregate, it doesn't really tell you very much about women. But here's how it breaks down for our state. So find your institution, please, and then notice whether you're pleased or shocked, or if this is news to you or what. All I can say, since I'm not from Utah originally, is shame on SUU and SC, seriously. In this day and age, not to have women, and then you wonder why you don't get female students and why they don't stay. So this is our work. This is our work going forward. So the general question is, what kind of leadership does the world need? And I want to categorize 2 basic types, which I think you'll be familiar with. The first is the strong-armed command and control type, which I'm sad to say is increasing in the world. This is the dominant leadership model these days. As the uncertainty increases, leaders just try and control what they can control. So we have more policies, more bureaucracy, more reports, more regulations. And this is based on a fundamental assumption about people that's not very pretty. The fundamental assumption behind this form of command and control leader is, I'm smarter than everybody else, that's why I'm the leader, good on me, and people cannot be trusted. I don't know how else you would explain the increasing regulations, oversight, all of that craziness that's just escalating around the world. We do not trust people. This is the more feminine kind of leadership. Both of these statues are from the 16th century in Belgium. But the leader's host is someone who welcomes the work of others and who knows that they're not the smartest on the block and that nothing gets done without involving and engaging other people. So the leader's host, friends and I deliberately called it hosting leadership because it's the quality you bring when you're giving a party or a celebration, a baby's blessing, a wedding, a missionary farewell. You want people to feel welcome. And you spend time making sure that you acknowledge them. I've met several women leaders, many in education, who will stand at the entrance to the school door every day or the classroom. I do this in classroom settings. And just welcome everyone as they come in the room. It's a very nice custom. It gets a little strange if they don't know that you're the faculty member, and they just think you're some strange person shaking hands. But generally, it's an invitation to say, I'm glad you're here, and I need you. I need you to do the work. So a leader's host can't put on a good party without guests. And we can't do the complex work of organizing and leading without each other and without involving many more people. So all of this is based on what we believe about people. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama said simply, we must begin by putting faith in the basic goodness of human nature. And then we find some universal principles, things like trust and respect and honesty. These are very basic to human beings. However, I just want to underline the first part of what he said, because I work with an extraordinary large number of leaders, and over the years, and I've always been able to tell which way their leadership was going to go. Were they going to act like I'm in charge, I'm the hero, you do what I say, or were they going to act more as the host and engage us? I could always tell which path they were going down if we had a conversation about the people who work for them. And what they would reveal is, well, no, I don't trust anyone, or, if I'm not there, nothing gets done, or, I have these systems of control because I've learned the hard way, you can't trust people. Then I know there's no hope. But if it's someone who's had a very good experience with other people's engagement, then I know we can get somewhere. And this isn't a choice, by the way. We're not solving our problems by relying on one expert leader. We're just complexifying our issues. I don't know what it feels like to you in whatever your position is, but I'd like you to tune in and see how good is your institution at solving problems right now. Does each problem lead to 10 more once you solve it? I mean, my favorite quote of the month is, the cause of problems is solutions. And I would just ask you to notice whether that's what's happening within your own institution. So, who do we choose to be for this time? That's the question. And these are women, statues from the Greek area of the Aegean, 3,500 years, 5,500 years ago, which I find quite amazing, right? So the other side of that question of who do we choose to be is, how are you right now using whatever power and influence you have? And what direction do you want to develop your power? I mean, I looked at what's coming up for the rest of the day and in the workshops over the fall. These are all important capacities to develop, but I would seriously encourage you to stay focused on this question. Why are you becoming a leader? It's not for the money, right? Yeah, you got really bad advice if it was. So to think about why you have chosen to develop yourself, this is a very important place to dwell. Is it because you like students? Because you like serving certain population? You like the sense of teamwork? You like the sense of learning, being in a place where learning is happening? Or it was just a convenient job? It could be any of those things, and of course it changes over time. But if you're going to keep coming to events like this, select breakout sessions that are of greatest usefulness for you, please do not ever lose sight of the fact that you have the capacity to develop your leadership. And then you have the capacity to use it for greater effectiveness. I hope that's already inside you. But right now, I'd like to give you a little test of how are you using your power and influence. So whatever level you're at, even if you just started in your position, there are several ways we react to situations where we really want to do something. We want to be helpful. So some of us try and fix it. This is one of my granddaughters, by the way. There's more grandchildren photos coming, I warn you. But do you just get in there and work really hard saying, I'll just work overtime, I've got to straighten this out? You might find great pleasure, I certainly did, in thinking, well, I know how to fix this, so I'm just going to work really hard. The problem is when the problems are increasing, you end up working harder and harder with less and less results often. But maybe you go to battle. Maybe you develop a sense of righteous indignation for what's happening to a student or what's happening with an issue on campus. And so you just get yourself up and really gear up to stop it, you know, using your spirited aggression. Maybe you give up in despair. By the way, all of these, I mean, I go through them every week, you know, depends what day. And that's okay. It really is. At least I think it is. Do you just let it go? Do you walk away? These are Galapagos tortoises. But my favorite Galapagos photo is about to appear on the screen. Do you become cynical? This is going to be my new t-shirt line. It's going to have some sort of slogan that says, "You expect me to do what?" You know? It's a blue-footed booby, which is actually a very beautiful seagull, but not in this photo. How often do you get despairing and cynical and angry? These are things to notice. Frustrated, overwhelmed, exhausted. These are very common experiences these days. Or sometimes we do shopping therapy, right? We constantly remodel our home. Or one of my signs of how many people are withdrawing from this very troubled world and are just cocooning into their own lives is the size of TV screens you can now buy for the home. I was just in Europe and they didn't believe me when I told them that this past Christmas you could buy a 9-foot TV screen. And it wasn't for home theaters. It was for people who just want to cocoon. And if you live in Provo and you get Google Fiber now, you can just disappear from the world into the internet. So these are choices, and I said I run through these behaviors a lot, but they're not helpful as strategies for coping. And they're certainly not helpful long term if you want to be an effective leader and use your power and influence well. So there are other choices, and none of them are easy. They require a level of courage, which I hope you all have. At this time, the whole globe is shook up, so what are you going to do when everything's falling apart? Well, 2 choices, according to this teacher. You're going to become more fundamentalist and just insist on doing it the old way and your way, or your boss is just insisting on that. Or you're going to live your life as an experiment. Give up the old ambitions and just go for it. My favorite expression for the moment, just go for it. Is it going to get any worse if you don't? You know, in some instances. This is the role of pioneers in history, that this was said by a German activist, that when an old culture is dying, the new culture is born from a few people who are not afraid to be insecure. And one of the things I have to say that frustrates me about us Western women is we want to make a difference. We want to solve problems of injustice or poverty or treatment of abuse of children. We want to solve these problems, but we don't want to get the men angry. We don't want to disturb relationships with the men. And yet we still want to make a difference on these issues. This gets easier as you get older. Okay? So just notice that starting around 50, I always give book titles for decades. So 50 was No Nice Girls Over 50. Like, I'm just going to do what I need to do. 60s has been, look, I know stuff. Listen to me. Okay. 70s is going to be, how on earth did I get this old? But I would like you to notice how often you fall silent because you don't want to offend a male colleague. That's okay. Just notice it, okay? Because when we make these choices consciously, then we can change and grow. But if we're just always saying, oh, well, I can't say anything, we're not using our power and influence appropriately. So this may be in the category, another granddaughter, of, was the title of one of my books was Walk Out, Walk On. And this came from a group of students in India, high school students who could no longer stand the education they weren't getting in school. It was a factory model of education. They felt they were dying. They were just losing their creative spark. So they left school, they walked out. And when they did that, the school authorities immediately said, oh, you're dropouts, you're a failure. And they turned around and said, oh no, you failed us. We're not dropouts, we walked out. And then they walked out to walk on. This is the process, and I'd like to give you this as a question. We walk out of situations where we feel we are shrinking, or we feel we are not developing our best behaviors. We feel we're not capable of growing or contributing. So it's a kind of slow, shrinking, dying feeling we have. It can be a job, it can be a relationship, it can be where you live. But it's important to notice when you feel, I'm becoming smaller, less and less of myself. Because that's the moment to walk out. And when you walk out in faith that you are capable of more. Another job, a better relationship, a better living situation, that you still trust somewhere in you, you know you're still a creative person who can contribute. Walking out is terrifying. But walking on is when we reclaim the next level of our capacity. So I'd ask you to think about this in terms of, are there any situations in your life that you might have to walk out of? And then find a friend who will help you think this through. So the role that I would like us to accept is what I'm calling warriors for the human spirit. Who are the people who are going to champion people, children, learning, the human potential that's in everyone? And I use the word warrior very carefully. It comes from the Tibetan word of one who is brave. But warriors are always brave in this sense. They're brave enough to believe in other human beings, in human goodness. They're brave enough to try and not add to the aggression and fear that is so rampant in our organizations these days. I think this is a wonderful role for us, and it's also a role that requires dedication and commitment. And it requires that we persevere against very trying circumstances. So I do want to introduce you to this topic of perseverance. And I especially want to draw your attention, this is my book cover. The book it is very small. It's designed to be carried with you for emergencies, literally. But if you look at the cover, this was done by a New Orleanian artist, Asante Salam, who, with her family, they fled before Hurricane Katrina, and they had no home to come back to, and they were separated. So for many months, she was in California, someone else was in Chicago, and her family was just split up. This is one of the great tragedies of Katrina. There were often families of 4 generations living near each other, and they had to go to separate places. So they call it the diaspora still. But Asante had been trained as an artist, and she said this piece represented the day when things turned for her. She was in a beautiful setting near San Diego, and she just felt inspired. So if you look in the upper right corner, you see those creases. She worked with a cardboard box. That was her palette, her canvas. And then those blossom petals were real. The white is tissue paper that she had, and she just tore it off and created a kind of pastiche. And then she took a charcoal pen. I think it's a very beautiful image, but I also love the symbolism of working with what we have to accomplish what we need. Now, a very wonderful leader friend of mine, a woman who had to deal a lot with government craziness after Katrina and after Hurricane Ike, she would always send me texts when she was desperate. She was in a meeting one day, and people were not getting the services they needed. And this is what she texted me. Every day I have to make a choice not to give up. And for me, this is what perseverance requires. Maybe it's not daily, but it's not a bad thing every day to feel a sense of, can I still do this? Can I still stay here? Can I still make a difference? It's good to assess this on a daily basis. Although if you're doing it with a friend or a partner, you'll drive them crazy. They'll just say, well, you just decide once and for all, please, you know. But it's strengthening your commitment. So here come one of my grandsons. Because the work of persevering starts from passion, right? He's still adorable, but he's 6 now. It starts from passion, and then we end up with setbacks and failures, right? We get very disappointed. So it's not enough to be passionate about your work, because that won't last forever. So this commitment has to be much deeper. And it was well described in the Chinese character for perseverance, which is a knife suspended over a heart. It's Chinese. It could mean 1,000 things, right? But it certainly indicates a kind of tension or a kind of danger or a kind of watch out, caution. Although, you know, I always felt when I'm doing this work, at any moment, you know, that knife could just come down. It gets dangerous out there. But at any moment, the knife could also open my heart, and I could feel more compassion and more commitment to serve others. So now I want to take you into an examination of your own ancestry, because everyone in this room, everyone who's alive today, had ancestors who persevered. So could you call to mind, let's keep it to the women right now and celebrate them, the women in your family line who really sweated and toiled and persevered so that you could be here right now. Just think of those women. You can go back generations. They could have crossed the plains, but can you all think of women in your life who made it possible for you to be here? Yeah. So one of my teachers said this to me. He said, you know, it's just our turn. That's all. It's no big deal. The women before us, the men before us, they've suffered from war and famine and immigration and brutality and all sorts of things. And they made it possible for us to be here. So why are we so whiny? I think I know why, because we're now living in a culture that just cultivates, you need this, you want that. You know, you're not happy if you're just with yourself. But still, let's just notice it's just our turn. And really, it's wonderful to stand on these shoulders. If these women are still alive, please go and thank them today. Please do that. Because they, like all people who persevere, had to deal with this list of terrible behaviors. Right? I just want to say one thing about criticism, because it's such a woman thing. I'm still not over it, you know. And yet, it's also, we live in a culture now in which everything is thumbs up and thumbs down. Everything is, do you like it or dislike it? Everyone asks for your opinion about things you know nothing about. But still, you probably click on the thumb up or thumb down, right? And then people feel free to slam each other, to bully each other. So it's a hypercritical environment. However, the Buddha, who lived 2,500 years ago, said this, that criticism has been going on through the ages. They criticize the silent ones, they criticize the talkative ones, they criticize the moderate ones. This is the important part. There is no one in the world who escapes criticism. There never was and never will be, nor is there now, the wholly criticized nor the wholly approved. When I was starting to present very radical new ideas about leadership, and I was getting a lot of criticism. I was called a lunatic often. It became a compliment after a while. But I had some hard situations. And this quote was very, very helpful to me. It's like we can't escape it. So just bear this in mind. There's such a thing as good feedback. I'm not dismissing that. But all the random comments and slights and slurs that come at us, that people feel free to do in meetings or just casually, you've just got to walk away from that. Really have to. Just be clear in yourself of what you stand for, what you're trying to accomplish, and also talk to other women about this. So here are a few guides for your behavior that I know really help us persevere. The first is, I keep mentioning friends, right? Pay exquisite attention to relationships, because this is a very polarizing environment, and there's so much blame and criticism. There's organizational blame, instant blame when anything goes wrong. We have to keep together, and therefore, attend to your relationships. Don't let them slip away the way they do. And especially, let us focus on supporting one another. I would prefer to never hear another woman criticize a second woman. I think we just are feeding the enemy when we do that. Well, I would never work for a woman. They're so bitchy. Just don't say it. Even if it's true in your experience, don't validate it, because most women are wonderful to work with. Have you noticed? Although I had my comeuppance on this, I walked into a bank. This was like in the late 70s. And it was all women tellers. And I was so excited. I said, wow, it's all women. And one of the tellers said, I know, it's terrible. But we've got our work cut out for us in this state. So we really need to support one another. And us older ones need to mentor you younger ones. And you younger ones need to support us older ones, because we've gotten this far and there still are more trials and tribulations ahead. So we really need to have tight relationships here as women, and not fall sway to, oh, well, you're just a feminist. Just check that in your own behavior as well. And then remember why we do our work. As I said, coming back to purpose, coming back to what got you into this in the beginning, crucial conversations to have with yourself, with your partner, with other sisters. Sometimes it's hard to remember. If you've had a really bad day, this is the most important conversation because you're just overwhelmed with how much brutality has come at you. So then it's time to really sit and reflect, why am I in this? This is the strength, the real warriors of the human spirit strength. Now, none of this works if you don't have time to think. How many of you feel you have good time to think? Yeah, notice, it's like 4 people, and probably 2 of them are retired and just snuck in. It is incredible the way we're trying to operate in this fast-paced world. We're constantly distracted, we're overly busy, and we're not spending time thinking through the consequences of any decision. We're just making decisions. You will not survive or develop in this environment unless you find time to think. Time to think with colleagues. If you're the boss, you create that space. Absolutely survival skill essential. If you're a lone practitioner, which I don't think you are, but find time just over lunch. How many of you go to lunch anymore? You know, how many of you know when your workday ends? We're just driving ourselves to a level of insanity here, and the antidote to this is to find time to think. Now, one of the ways to do that, it's real easy in this state. You go to someplace spacious and beautiful. This is down on Hogs Back Ridge, Route 12, Boulder Mountain. Find some place where you can just settle and just start to notice, how am I changing? Am I becoming more aggressive? What role is fear playing in me these days? Am I more anxious? How am I doing with my relationships? When was the last time I saw that person? I really should call them. Yeah, but they're too busy too. Find some ways to notice how you are being changed by the craziness that's out there. And I would especially say, notice if you're becoming critical and judgmental, if you're becoming more easily angry and frustrated, if you're not preserving precious relationships, if you're not spending time on the things that nourish you, these are the things to notice. And you will not notice them unless you take time to settle down and just look at the big picture. And the final practice is quite simply this. Have something in your life that gives you a sense of groundedness and peace. It could be gardening. My new kitten is doing that for me right now. It could be a pet. It could be, I was going to say a baby, but no, that's ambiguous there. It could be going for walks. It could be a special place that just gives you a sense of peace. It could be daily prayer. It could be meditation. It could be a sport. But whatever it is, please cultivate it because you're not going to find it in this world. It's up to you to discover, which I can guarantee you will discover, that if you find the right practice, you will discover we have this huge reservoir in us of peace. It's quite unbelievable how peaceful we are inside. But you have to find a practice that lets you in on that great secret. So these are all behaviors that you have to take responsibility for if you're going to be someone who perseveres. Therefore, if you're going to continue to cultivate yourself as a leader so that you can create change, so that you can create environments where people want to work, where people feel creative. So it really is a high level of personal responsibility these days. But you came to this, so that's a very good sign. And I want to close with a prophecy from the Hopi people of Arizona, New Mexico. They issued this in 2000. Their stewardship is for the planet, the state of the planet. So it's very, very heavy for them and very troubling. And they issue prophecies, they issue letters to be read in public. They go to the United Nations, and still they're just holding this sorrow for what's happening to the planet. So they issued this at the millennium. Here's how they describe these times. Here is a river flowing now very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid, who will try to hold on to the shore. They are being torn apart and will suffer greatly. Know that the river has its destination. The elders say we must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river, and keep our heads above water. So here you see, there's more coming, but here you see the same clarity. The future is born from a few people who are not afraid to be insecure. Can we live our life as an experiment, making it up as we go along? Can we not cling to the old ways? As these elders say, people who cling to the old ways will be torn apart and suffer greatly. I certainly see that in many organizations right now. So here's the prophecy of how to be together. And I say, see who is there with you and celebrate. At this time in history, we are to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. Lighten up. For the moment we do, our spiritual growth and journey come to a halt. The time of the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves. Banish the word struggle from your attitude and vocabulary. Oh, what happened here? All that we do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration, for we are the ones we have been waiting for. This is the sacred work of women right now, and of men who appreciate the great feminine principle or the great feminine perspective on people. So this is us, perhaps. I just want to say one last word about this phrase. Have you heard this phrase before? We are the ones we've been waiting for. It's a song, and it actually comes from a poem by the American poet June Jordan, who wrote it for the women of South Africa, who in 1955, before internet, no phones, pure word of mouth, assembled 40,000 women and children on the capital of white, racist South Africa to protest the newest apartheid laws, which were destroying them, and their children were dying, and their husbands were being imprisoned, and the women were being imprisoned. So they got it together, 40,000 of them. And in this very beautiful poem of tribute, the last line is this: we are the ones we have been waiting for. I hope you are, and I hope you'll join many, many thousands of women who are responding to this call. Thank you.
Pick up your mic, I'll be over here. We'd like to thank Meg for her words of wisdom and inspiring us to persevere. And from the Women's Success Center, here is a blanket and some chocolate.
Hershey.
May it help you persevere.
My favorite kind.
Thank
Thank you very much.